But I said to him, I asked him about his work, and he said, I use Photoshop to help me recapture what my heart saw.
Yeah.
You know? And then everything changed for me, and I became so much more open, because I realized that, first of all, so many things affect what we see. Our lens choice, the image, the sensor can only capture
Everything.
so much.
There are 1,000 little choices that go into the making of every photograph.
And the technology can't even capture what our eyes see, so
Right.
we have to reinterpret it using software.
Yep.
Or a darkroom, and then on top of it, putting images together. But it's really what we're feeling.
Well, but it's like I said, nobody yells at novelists, right? Just think of me as a novelist, and then you can get over this reality thing. Anybody else? Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Whew.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute break.
Nice.
And then Karen will go. I'm only saying, you know, like, yeah.
Because you're used to pros and I'm not a pro.
You are a pro. Stop. You're gonna be just fine. You take a couple of deep breaths. The first 1 or 2 slides will be hard.
We don't ask questions.
And then you go through.
Just imagine everyone in their underwear. That's all.
I've heard that before.
And just imagine you're looking at Cliff,
Yeah.
right? And
No, she's gonna get out of breath though. I don't want her to get all sweaty. That's unfair. Don't do that to her.
you thank Cliff for all his.
Yeah,
right? You
I know
thank
I'm
Cliff,
thanking
you thank
everybody.
me, and you're on your way. You'll be fine. So go get yourself another little one. If you
Okay,
need, yeah?
just a little one.
Go.
Okay. And then I'll come back and we'll start.
Yeah, but be careful with the computer.
Yeah, I'll put it over there.
Okay. I love you. We're at the next level.
I'm just getting a drink, then we'll start. All right. Because I'm so nervous. Don't be nervous.
Hi, Karen.
Hey! Hey! Sorry, Nancy, can I scoot by you quickly? Is it... It's gonna work?
I just get up.
I've got a mic on my back.
Oh yeah,
I don't... We'll be cozy.
do it that way.
I'm gonna get a drink, yeah. Where's my rum? Did you find the rum? Hold on, I don't have a drink.
Here, right there. Take it this.
I have more, but I don't know where my backpack is. No, it's okay.
¿Es una casa?
No, it's owned by a photo place. Okay. Took the rum. I need some kind of drink. The rum is in the backpack. If you can find that. I don't even know where it is. Oh, I thought it was finished.
He seems really nice. I took him back here to have some rum, so I said hi. I was like, oh,
Okay, come with me. I need you. Is there a beer? Mary.
Mary, they're like,
Could I get a Coors Light?
You sure can.
Thank you. And then I'm gonna start. Actually. Excuse me. Yeah, we met. Yeah, well, I'm gonna start. Sorry, you guys, let me just squeeze by you quickly.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, Grayson. He's trying to. Oh, yeah, Grayson's trying to make me go book. I'm like,
Regina, sorry, let me just get by you quickly.
I couldn't move.
It's okay. Now you can. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna go now.
You're gonna knock him off.
Something to like,
all right, you're on.
Oh, come on, this is so good.
This is really, come on. This is about the biggest, loveliest black you could ever, you know?
Yeah, I'm not even gonna read. My talk is so different than Chino's. I just don't even. Opposite. Yeah.
We have to be ourselves.
Yeah.
You can never be you. You can never,
Right.
you know. What makes you amazing, Karen, is you are unique. The energy that That's what.
I can't bring what Gino brings. Gino can't bring what I bring. Right? Nobody, we can't bring what Sherry brings. So,
I mean, it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment. That's all. Oh, it's good.
Trying to run a tight machine here.
I know, and I'm getting more nervous as
No,
everybody.
don't get nervous. You take a couple of breaths. You thank Cliff. You thank me. Take a breath, and you go.
I know, I'll be good.
You'll be great.
Why don't you like the videography? Okay. You should go. Yeah. No, because you're being. I know.
Thrown out of this country.
You should.
Where are you going?
Going down for the second.
No, I'm starting like right now.
Okay, sure.
Can you wait?
Okay, sure.
Por favor.
Okay, sure.
Right now, they're just looking for the woman who wants to introduce me. But we're already behind. Here she comes. ¿Dónde está Andrés?
I have no idea if we're going to be easy going down for a second.
Sure do. Yeah, I'm ready when you are. Okay.
Everybody grab a seat.
Okay. Okay.
Once it's quiet, it's just you. I'm not saying a word.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. Okay, great.
Short, simple.
Yeah, totally. Okay, wait. I just want to just go like this a little bit. Okay, there we go. You are so gonna rock this.
Are you sure that's okay?
Yeah. You're gonna.
Coming out.
Yeah, I'm
Is
just
it
doing
the
that.
bra?
No, you look hot. You look
Is it
hot.
the front?
No, it's fine. You look
Should I put
hot.
on the sweater?
The sweater?
Oh,
No, 'cause it's too hot in here.
okay.
Yeah, and you're gonna get hot talking. Yeah. No, you look great.
Okay.
You look great. It's gonna be so amazing. I'm so excited. Wait, how many times have you been to Cuba? 18 times in 3 years?
19, 18 or 19, something
Or
like
19?
that.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe you want to say that, at least you want to.
I do want to actually. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna speak really quickly, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Change this mic up. You want to get it on the the outside. It sounds a little muffled.
Oh, did you already check? Okay.
Oh, I have to stand right next to you so that Cliff can hear me on your microphone. Is this your microphone? Okay, so will you stand right here and I'll stand here? Okay. Okay, thanks you guys. Okay, so thank you all for sticking around. It looks like almost no one departed, which is really cool. Our next presenter is Karen Zuckerman, who also is a dear friend of mine, as you heard me talk about earlier. And she is an incredible photographer. I was absolutely blown away when I saw her work. The craziest thing is she's actually new to photography. She is a poet and a writer. And I think that she's interpreting the world in a poetic way now visually. So I would basically call her a visual poet. And you'll see her work. It's a combination of work that she did in Burma and in Cuba. And she is obsessed with Cuba, as you'll see. She's been there like around 18 times in the past 3 years or something. Those who think it's not possible to go, it actually is. Although it is getting tighter, but I'm sure you have ways. And I think you'll just really enjoy seeing her work. So take it away, Karen.
Muchas gracias, Shari. So yeah, thank you so much to Frank for this amazing event, and Cliff for the technology. But I really want to just say a quick thanks to, Shari referenced it earlier, but there was this magical evening a couple of months ago. It was the last night of APAD, and I was there and feeling lonely and emotional for reasons I won't get into. And I met Shari at the very end, at the final minute of the final hour, and she was with this guy, Gino, who you just saw, who I didn't meet before. And we walked out together, and we're walking down the street, and this guy started snapping our picture. And it was Grayson, who you see snapping my picture right now. And we spontaneously went to dinner, a magical dinner, as happens in New York with New Yorkers. And we all fell in love that night. I think we fell in love with each other. We fell in love with each other's projects. And we've become this like little unit of support for each other. And it was a month ago I went to see Grayson's talk here. He introduced me to Frank, and of course that's how this night started. And again, as Shari mentioned, in a way I want to say it starts further back with my dearest, dearest friend Richard Sandler, who has been my best friend for 20 years and so important and dear to me. Everything I know, I learned from him, and I'm excited for you to see his work following mine. So it's a really special night to be with these guys. So I'm going to start out, and I'm going to go through the first few slides quite quickly, because these are before I knew how to use a camera. Really. I went to Southeast Asia. I was there as a Buddhist meditator, and I had an MFA in poetry. And I stumbled upon, many things happened, but one of the things that happened in the course of a few years was I stumbled upon this real true fact that the Malaysian government was selling Burmese refugees to human traffickers. And nobody was covering this story. And I didn't have a camera, I didn't know how to use a camera, and that was okay, because these people couldn't be identified. But this was kind of my start of, I was a Buddhist meditator, I identified as a poet, and somehow I saw a need, I jumped in with all I had, I became a documentarian. So I recorded these audio stories. PBS and NPR both picked it up and featured my work in their in those broadcasts, but they needed imagery, and I didn't really have it. So we got some from a local NGO in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And these are just a couple of slides very quickly when I didn't know how to use it. This was a point and shoot that I had. And again, you know, they couldn't be identified, so for those purposes it was okay. But then things changed. Burma opened up. Aung San Suu Kyi was released from house arrest. I was able to go back to Burma because I wasn't for many years because I had been writing about it. And I started an NGO with a very dear Burmese human rights activist friend of mine called the My Me Education Project for Myanmar Mobile Education. And we bring free education to child laborers. Child labor is a huge issue in Burma. But we Westerners come in with our INGOs and we think we're going to fix the problem. But the reality is, quite frankly, if the kids don't work, the families do not eat. So our idea was, let's bring education to the kids where they are. So a lot of these kids were working in these rudimentary kind of dirt floor tea shops. And here's one of our child worker students here. And we come in and we bring the classroom to them on mobile buses. And I bought a camera because I wanted to document these stories for our nonprofit. So I had my camera. Here's a few images from behind the scenes, behind the kitchen. The legal age in Burma is 14 for kids to work. So these kids behind in the kitchen are like 8 or 9. And I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm happy to talk about it on the break. And what was great is we created a community. So the big kids took care of the little kids here. And this is them after hours. This is us bringing the classroom to them. And we also opened it up to monastic schools. So now we have over 3,000 kids in our program. And the monastic schools are like welfare centers in Burma. The parents can't afford for the kids to go to school, so they send them to monasteries. That guy in the center is Tim A. Hardy. He's our director, my friend and the co-founder. It's really his baby, this project. So then, that's Tanaka. That's it's like a natural sunscreen. It's from the root of a tree. You find that all over Burma. So this next image was, so I had my camera. I felt empowered to document. I felt a need to document. And I was at a pagoda, and this woman and her 6-year-old girl were stealing from the meditators who had their eyes closed. They were literally sticking their hands in the bag. And this woman and her 6-year-old got caught. And somehow I was able to document the whole situation because I thought this was great to show, to bring it full circle to My Me. Like, you think it's bad that kids are working, but actually, if they're not working, at least we can give them an education and some community. If not, a lot of kids just don't go to school in Burma, and this is their reality. At this point, I still didn't really know how to use a camera. But I will say that as a poet, I kind of walked away from poetry a little bit because I felt it was a little bit, I'm not saying poetry is like this, but for me, I'm a neurotic person and I had a complex and I felt like it was too self-absorbed. So becoming a documentarian was really wonderful for me, and I felt that there was something to that I could.
That's such a strange idea, a self-absorbed New Yorker.
Yeah. So anyway, but it was, you know, I continued to document beyond our project. This was a HIV clinic. I put this photo up for my friend Maria, my Cubana, who's here, because she loves this photo. But so I branched out and I started documenting HIV clinics. This kid was an orphan of HIV, but HIV negative. These women were HIV positive. This was a wonderful clinic that gives everybody somebody to love. And then, you know, I was hanging around with Richard, and I learned everything I knew about was really about being a street photographer. So I took to the streets, and I just started documenting what I saw. These were laborers. This is in a harbor in Yangon.
Karen, can you crystallize, what did he say to you, or what did he show you that gave you that inspiration?
His images were amazing, and he had not only that. He had when he used to live on East 10th Street. His apartment was like a museum, and he had photographs all along the wall of all these street photographers that he knew and were friends of his. And I, you know, my adult life, I kind of came up in the last 20 years looking at these photos. So I didn't study photography, but I studied Richard's hallway. And then at some point, I just broke free and thought, you know, it doesn't have to be about documentary. It's about joy too. It's about just, you know, documenting what's there. This was, I have a whole series of these. This was in a monastery in Burma, where these are young novitiates. Like I said, it's like a welfare center for them, or maybe I didn't say that, but they send their kids there. And I started working on composition. So I think we're going to go to Cuba now. Sorry I rushed through those, because I really want to go to Cuba, because that's what this project is about, that I'm working on now. And Cuba changed me and my life in many ways. This was my view. I've been to Cuba, I think Shari said, but I've been there 18 or 19 times. In this interval between when Obama opened up the embassy, because I arrived that week for the first time. I'd always dreamed of Cuba, but I arrived that week. And then in that interval between Obama opening it and Trump closing it. And I've watched Cubans kind of do this high wire act, balancing between hope and resignation and everything else they have going on. But this was the view from my apartment last winter. I was there for 4 months. Sometimes I was there for months at a time, because I was trying to study Spanish at the university. I fell in love with Cuba and Cubans, and I wanted to go in deep. And what happened to me was pretty amazing. So I'll talk about that as I go through it. But this was my view for 4 months, and I wrote a poem looking out at this, which I was going to read, but I'm not gonna. Sorry. I'm gonna. No, maybe at the end if we have time. I have it with me. So these girls are from Trinidad, which is a town in the south part of the island, kind of central, and originally, I got to know them and their family, and I went back for multiple visits, and I thought I was still in that documentary mindset, and I thought that I had to document something, and so I was going to document them, and they were wonderful, and I watched them grow up really fast, faster than I grew up. But then something happened, and I just relaxed and let go, and I attribute that to Cuba itself. There's something about Cubans and Cuba, at least for me, this is my impression. We've got Cubanos here who may disagree with me, but what I realized was that they have this incredible sort of balance between incredible self-confidence and also vulnerability. I mean, their situation is somewhat vulnerable. So I call it fierceness and fragility, and they sort of inhabit these opposing ends of the emotive spectrum, and I love that. You know, when I see it, it just creates something in me that resonates, and it makes me feel close. It's an intimate feeling. It's hard to describe. It's like a poem or a dream, but that's what's kind of guided me in Cuba. I got away from being the documentarian, and maybe went back to more poetic roots, although maybe more of a visual poetry. So this young guy, he's about 15 years old, and he's running in this abandoned stadium. This is the Jose Marti Stadium. And as you know, investment pours into these 5-star hotels, stadiums like this, which were so amazing, kind of go unrepaired, but the Cubans are making good use of them. Here it's flooded and the Malecon is closed, and you can see the waves in the back, but he's still training. And by the way, the last time I was there, maybe just 6 or 8 weeks ago, they've started renovating or doing something. You're not allowed in here anymore. It's walled off. They're fixing it. And this is the day I got the first shot that I took with a wide-angle lens. I mean, we should talk about photography. So just street photography, frame of mind. This is also in Trinidad. I think the most interesting thing about this photo is something you might not see, but this guy in the doorway has an erection. And when these two people left, he exposed himself to me, and I have that image in his full glory right up against that cross, which I'm not showing, but if you want to message me, I'll send it to you. So I have started to write a little bit of poetry because Cuba has kind of given me back, it's given me permission to be a poet, which is amazing. Like, I realized I can be a documentarian and a street photographer and a poet and a friend and a lover all at the same time. So I'm going to sprinkle these with a little bit of poetry. Your 96-year-old smile that you insist has only 82. Your Santa Carmen, your heart, and you, Carmencita. What will be left when I make it back to you? So this is a woman I became close with. She's 96 years old, and she lives in this grand mansion with no furniture that she inherited from a revolution. And she's cut that mansion into 4 different parcels, and she sold those parcels, or maybe she rented them, I guess, probably more like it, to have something to live on. And this is a photo I call Rise, Nina, Rise. And what's interesting about this is, and my friend Andres, I don't know, he's here somewhere, he's from Cuba, and he looked at this photo, and he told me what was really interesting to him. He found this to be the most representative photo of my work in Cuba, because he said when he arrived here in the US, he was watching the debates, and it was Obama versus McCain at that time. And there was that famous question, rights or privilege, healthcare, is this a privilege, is this a right? And so McCain famously answered what he answered, and Obama said, no, this is a right, healthcare is a right. And he said when he looked at this image, he saw that, because now that he's in the United States, if you take this girl, who's a poor girl of color, living in, you know, what we might call the ghetto in the Bronx somewhere, although here she's in Trinidad. She doesn't really have much more than the shirt on her back. And look at the way she's moving for me, for the camera. That's not a jump from rumba. That's not a jump from salsa. And that's not a kid just jumping. That's this young, poor black girl who's already been well trained in classical ballet. You compare that with a girl from the Bronx. That would be a privilege, and Cuba's a right. So I know there's a lot of, you know, politics around Cuba, and I try not to say too much, but, you know, we look at a lot of what they don't have, but there's a lot that they have, and education, a lot of people know, is one of those things, but it's education not just for traditional academia, it's an education of culture, too. And it's really amazing, and it really spoke to me. And this is, you know, another thing that's amazing. So that angel you see there above him is on the edificio, the building that belongs to the Union of Women Editors. So there's a whole building dedicated to women editors in Cuba. And that's what that angel is. And this is in Baracoa. And Baracoa is the easternmost tip to the island. A lot of tourists don't get there. It's actually only 40 miles off the coast of Haiti. And when I went there, it was a year after Hurricane Matthew, which really ravaged the island. And I was introduced to this man, and he showed me his property, and there was a lot of damage. You tell me how she came full on, a legendary passion she carried in her hair, in her arms, in her breath. And you showed me what she left in her wake, you and this land, now a full year after La Tormenta, the storm. She's moved on to love wreck somewhere else. And this is every December 17th is the pilgrimage de San Lazaro. I don't know if are you all having trouble hearing me in the back? Sorry. So this is the pilgrimage of San Lazaro. And people come from all over the island. And the last 2 miles, if they're able, or the last mile or so, they walk on their knees to pay respects to San Lazaro for healing for themselves, for their loved ones. And, you know, even though that's not my religion, that's not my practice, I had tears in my eyes when I took this shot. I mean, the devotion was incredible. And I can relate to devotion. There's something that moves me, and I'm moved by what moves me. And this really moved me, this moment. This classic street photography shot from the Richard Sandler playbook. This guy coming around the corner is what makes the shot, probably, although the girl with her arms in the air doesn't hurt. This is in Trinidad. In Cuba, you know, the Afro-Cubano religion is everywhere, even if you're not practicing that. It's just part of the culture now, and this is a great example of somebody who is a devout Catholic and also devout to Ifa, which is one of the Afro-Cubano religions. And yeah, it makes things quite rich and quite complicated, especially when you get involved, your relationships intersect. Say more on that later. So right away, I felt like I was trying to do street photography. I wasn't really knowing what I was doing, but I was being invited into people's homes, and Cuba was getting under my skin. And I was documenting, or I was taking photos of things that felt mysterious and compelling and exciting to me, and I was really welcomed into the community. This is, I think, my first trip. No, but I came to speak Espanol. That's what I said on the first slide. I felt compelled. I studied at the university for a few months, and I study here as well. Mi español no es bueno ahora, pero quizás un día. Es suficiente, gracias. So I started, it took me a few years, but at the last couple of years I started getting invited to these ceremonios, these mostly Santeria ceremonies where they don't want you to photograph. But in this case, I knew the drummers. They were from a very well-known rumba band called Rumbata out of Camagüey. And they invited me to this ceremony and said I could photograph them, not when the practice was happening, but when they were just playing, that was okay. This is one of my most recent photos, so if you like it, it pleases me so much, because it's my new baby. This was taken in a town called Santa Fe, which is maybe an hour, less than an hour outside of Havana. I just jumped on a local guagua, a local bus. I didn't know where I was going, and I found this. Or it found me, maybe. Cockfighting is very popular in Cuba. This was a trainer. He showed me his birds, but this was a moment where they don't like to be photographed when they're with their cockfighting, with their cocks, because with their roosters, their gallos. And I have a lot of photographs, but I promise that most of them I wouldn't show. But here's, again, learning from Richard, composition. This is one of the most complex frames that I have. This is on a rooftop in Lauten. This is on a rooftop in Lauten, which is in Havana. This is in front of the Universidad, the university, near where I was staying, and I became good friends with this boy and some of his friends, which I talk about in another slide. I mean, my God, what's not for a poet to love? in this place. This is an early shot, an early street photograph shot. I got lucky with the man with his hands across his chest, and I call this my little angel with nunchucks. So here's a little poem with this. How many times have I seen you moving quickly from street to street, seeking out the shadows? Other times it's the shadows that seem to follow you. And I've become a hunter too, bearing down on these rare moments where you emerge, full of invitation and hiding. So one thing that, and I don't know if you can see that woman in the frame I spent a lot of time there. I had relationships. I had platonic, and I had one romantic relationship at one time there, and I got to really see Cuba and travel like a Cubana and be on the local guaguas and eat for 75 cents a day and see a side that I never would have, and it was amazing. But it's a different culture, and it reminded me a little bit of Burma in some ways. There are some comparisons and contrasts. These are two countries that have lived under decades of surveillance. And I don't know what the Cubanos might think when I say this, but there's this incredible welcomeness. But I found in my relationships, there was a lot that was never said, and there was a lot for me to guess or wonder about. And I don't think that ever goes away, or it didn't go away for me, and I'm still wondering with my friends and my relationships. And that brings me back to my Buddhist training in a way. It's like I had 2 decades of studying Buddhism in Southeast Asia, and I go to this complex Caribbean island, and the insights flower. It's about, loving without expectation and just cherishing what's there. And I may not get in return what I want or think I should, or get to know what I think I should, but there's something else there, which is really beautiful. And I feel like it brought me back to poetry, which I'm ever so grateful for. Another street scene in Trinidad, one of my first shots in Cuba. Okay, so these were the boys that I was telling you about. This was the guy who was near the university. I became really good friends with them, and I just want to say something about them. Cesar and Juanito are the bad boys of Barrio Cayo Hueso. They love me, and they lie to me. Juanito's lies are more complex. They're ballsy, and they're imaginative. Cesar has an angel side that often wins out, and when it doesn't, his smile betrays him. Cesar is the one with the cap. Just the most beautiful boy I've ever seen. And this is in Trinidad again, a quiet moment. This is an interesting story. So this woman that you see in the corner, she was sleeping. She, all her adult life, she lived in this apartment. This couple you see in the foreground in the photograph, it's their mother's apartment. She was like the last Miss Cuba before the revolution, or one of the last or something. And when they were quite young, the whole family moved to Miami and never came back. And this woman has been staying and taking care of the apartment. And now, since Obama opened the embassy, they've come back and they want the apartment back. And this is happening, as I understand it, as I've been told, all over Havana and really throughout the island. And so the families are still kind of being torn apart. This legacy continues. Trying on America is what I call this one. For better or ill. This is called Your Other Life. I hope you can see the cobweb from the doll to the doll. And this is the Cross of Light, Carmencita. This is Carmen. Here, let me present Carmen to you. You speak your silence and you search the thick tropic air for an answer. It's scorching in your garden, but cool and quiet in the big and empty house. Carmen, I can imagine your flowers still blooming. The rains have come, and you are there, standing by, and you search the thick tropic air for an answer. Your reply. So I hope to go to Cuba maybe next week or in the next 10 days, and I hope that I'm going mostly to go to Trinidad to see my friends there, and I really hope to see Carmen. I hope that she's still there. She would be 97. This is another image from San Lazaro, the pilgrimage. An early photo. You know, there's that confidence and that fragility. I love that. This is Ariel, the girl you saw at the very beginning that I said I was documenting her and her sister. Night scene from Havana. I just love the symmetry in this one. So this sewing machine is probably 100 years old. And this skill is being passed down from abuelo to her granddaughter, from grandmother to granddaughter.
You know, Karen, I just feel this anger at the way the Cubans have been treated. I just have to say, I'm so moved by these images, but suddenly it's like a rage of this inhumanity of the U.S. and its capitalist system against these people and making their lives miserable. So it's really great that you're showing their life and how alive they are remaining under the conditions that they've had to endure. Age of this inhumanity.
Yeah, so
Babying them to think that they're I feel like it's somewhat infantilizing them to think that it's, of course, the United States has a huge portion of the blame in the situation of Cuba, but to not even mention that the Cubans also have a government of their own, supposedly, is, I think, babying, you know, not considering the actual Cuban situation.
That's right.
And I come from the left entirely, and I swim on the left.
Or that Obama, as if Obama wasn't here.
And I just can't hear that without saying.
I think what he's remarking on is that these photos really humanize these people, whereas Cuba was kind of deemed like this enemy state. And once a country is deemed an enemy state, even for Iran, for example, look at photos of Iran, it's remarkably well developed.
Yeah, but
I just wanted to say that the photos.
okay, so maybe we can definitely talk more about this later, but I'm glad that the photos spark something, because one thing that I really want to do and don't want to do is everybody's going to Cuba and being a photographer, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I will because it's appropriate for this moment. And we're seeing the same, excuse my language, but the same fucking 10 scenes of a Havana street scene with the 3 people in the doorway or the classic car or what have you. And I just want to show Cuba for all its complexity. You can make an argument on every single, you know, angle of the prism. We could discuss forever, and there's people that can do it far more appropriately and more informed than I can. But I just wanted to show my experience of the people, which is a very intimate one. And I also wanted to go beyond Havana. So that's what I'm showing, and that's really...
That is really perfect. It's really perfect. But I think in the context of you as a photographer, you have emerged. Don't think of yourself as not equal to every other terrific photojournalist. You are there. You've stirred this conversation by these images. Bravo. Think of yourself in the same category as all of your mentors. You are one of them.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I am new to photography, but so there are a lot of cockfighters, and they don't want to have their faces shown because it's illegal to actually, the cockfights are illegal. You can train, but the fights are illegal. And so I was trying to be respectful to that. And again, we have all our ideas about this, like we do about Santeria and the animal sacrifice. But when you go there and you get to know these people, there's something else that touches you. There's something else that touches you, which is, again, this, you know, us human beings, or we human beings and our emotions. So in your yard, the light is strong and the fighting is fierce. In the dark, you are tender, stitching them up after practice and washing their feet lovingly like a mother. And boxing's very popular in Cuba, as many of you know. So I learned how to do some portrait photography, I guess, along the way as well. I just love her hands. To me, that's the whole photograph.
Love the glasses.
Yeah, that too. This is Richard Sandler's personal favorite. This is in Cienfuegos. You know, the isla is more than Havana. Drummers invited me. There are things you understand. You are the guardian of this moment, of gifts to be given to those we cannot see. And these are the animals that are tied up for sacrifice for these ceremonies. And, you know, I had a lot of ideas about that when I first started going to Cuba. And those are what they are. They're just ideas. This is devotion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
What do they do in this Santeria with the animals?
They sacrifice them. Yes.
Yeah, but then everybody eats them.
Often everybody eats them, yeah, so they're not going to waste. Absolutely. Let's lighten things up. This is Matanzas, where I spend a lot of time as well. Rumba, as I understand it, Rumba came from Matanzas. Maybe somebody here might beg to differ. I don't know.
It's a place where they have a lot of rumberos. Rumba came from, it's a big mix from the rumba from the, you know, Andalus with the Andalusia from the African that were brought to Cuba.
So way back.
It's a place
way
where
back.
they play a lot of rumba, great rumbero, but it's not coming exactly from there.
Okay, there you have it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. He said Thanksgiving they sacrificed the turkeys, for those who couldn't hear. This is from an apartment I stay in Havana. Sorry, I'm looking for my last little bit. This one's called How I Longed for a Window into You. And I'm going to leave you with this image. When I arrive, you're already there, hurling your body clockwise from the sun, the way you always do, taking your rightful place between the clouds and the sea. Soon, the light will leave us. So, thank you. Bob.
I have a photo question. From the beginning, you said you didn't really take photos. You didn't even have a camera. And all your great photos are all beautiful black and white. Did you ever think of doing anything in color, or how was this decision made?
Yeah.
From never even owning a camera to do this beautiful black and white work.
Well, I've never shot really in film. So I'm shooting in color, because I'm shooting digital, and then I'm converting to black and white. And I would really say that's probably the influence of this guy sneaking over the crowd over here, that you're going to see next. It's just hanging out with Richard and studying, through him, classic street photography, which was all black and white, and I fell in love with it. And then from my own point of view, my justification is that for me, particularly in a place like Cuba, and even Burma as well, but I would say more so in Cuba, the colors are so gorgeous and so vivid and so distracting. They're really distracting, and I wanted to get at the gesture, at the essence, at the emotional quality of that moment that spoke to me.
Cool.
So, yeah, that's...
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if throughout your visits, if you ever struggle with any ethical, conflicts.
I'm sorry, did I what?
Do you struggle with any ethical conflict as a photographer that I'm guessing you're either American or coming from the first world and going to do a taking pictures? I wonder if you at any point question if you had the right to. I'm not saying that you did or you didn't. I'm just asking if you.
The internal. Did I ask myself? So an inner conflict.
Exactly. But also, I want to mention to the person who used the phrase, I don't think that as photographers, we don't humanize people because they are humans already. They are people. No matter what they do, they are people. And we're not doing them a favor by documenting them one way or the other.
Yeah, so I would say yes. Thank you for your question. And of course, I consider that, but I'm going to be, really sincere, and, I'm a sensitive person. And I fell in love there. I fell in love literally with a person at one point, but I fell in love with my experience with really touched by this island, and I still am. Maybe I have a future there, And I don't, at some point, But what you're saying is absolutely valid, and if I'm really honest, of course, I think about that all the time. But at the same time, I also know where I'm coming from. And maybe originally it was more, let me photo. But now it's like, it's my life. Cuba's brought me back to poetry. It's brought me back to Buddhism. It's brought me back to my heart. It's about me. It's really about me. I mean, it's about Cubans, but it's about me, this work. I'm not trying to say too much about Cuba other than through my own, what I see and feel. It's too complex. I couldn't even go there.
One last. Are you thinking about doing a book of this incredible work?
Yes. I want to do a book of this work and include some poetry. Yeah. I guess I went over.
who said, my films, and in this case I could say my pictures, my films are not a conversation with the past as much as how the past has aged to become part of the present. And I always set out, I think, to, you know, be a social critic, you know. You know, very, very responsive and very selective, you know, about moments. And I don't know where it came from, but I sort of felt I had that ability. Like a hawk, because the guy was kind of invisible. I don't know, the way he walked, the way he shot, everything about him was, you know, utterly designed for the purpose of being invisible on the street and making pictures, and that was a big deal then. Now you can walk around with a cell phone camera, you know, and you can be, you know, like this, and you can look at, looks like you're looking at your phone, but you're making a picture. But, you know, with a camera, you don't have that kind of cover. So I just watched his body language, and I became color, the Winogrand Color Show. It's just remarkable. But I also because I didn't expect any support from that world, from the museum world, and I didn't get it. And so I just, I was able to be under the radar a little bit. And, here it is all these years later, and I'm, people are liking my work, and I'm, kind of scratching my head, and, it's kind of. You would put your picture, we would put our pictures up on the wall, and if he liked the picture, he'd go like this. That's it. If he did that, it was a good picture, because he didn't do that often. A couple of people got kicked out of the class because, they paid money and they thought they were going to get some sort of a critique of their work. But Winogrand couldn't do that, and when asked, why won't you talk about photographics and, style, content, whatever, he said something that stuck with me my whole life. He said, if I talk about it, I'm afraid that I will scare the muse that makes these things happen. So for him, it was really about magic. You could, and that was, in a way, maybe the biggest, the greatest takeaway of hanging out with him for that weekend. So he did do this. You walk away from, and that was the moment that I got the guts to do even crazier things, and it got a lot crazier, But that was, in retrospect. Katya Essen, yes, thank you. And it is a hilarious, wonderful piece of work that could only obviously have been made by, a woman. It's fabulous. Text on Facebook from a man, and he says, that photograph, that's my mother. and I want to tell you about my mother. And it turns out that she was had a horrible, well, I mean, that goes. This, me and my father, that's my father up on the top, and that's me. see me through the day, and it did. And I guess I felt, you know, like a strong intention, you know, to do that. Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there were a number of situations where there was angry people that were involved in lawless behavior on the subway, you know, and I just try to keep myself. 2.5 years ago, and it was edited by Regina Montfort, who is right over. Order and the sense to this book. They won't touch my work. They don't want to show this. I mean, they don't want to show the graffiti. True. I mean, this is social critique. You know, I'm walking around thinking that, you know, this America that I live in, you know, has a lot of lies, you know, stitched into its fabric, and I'm beginning to become the person that I am now, where I am seeing this culture. Personal journalism, you know, like the combination of the two, of a street picture, but also journalistic in nature. called Archive. Charlie was not only a terrific photographer, he was a great writer. So here's what he writes in the epilogue to his book. He says, "The photographic goal flows from the nature of the medium. Photography is the only medium that originates in and is caused by the real, historical, time-space event of a collision between a person, a camera, and reality. But the photograph itself occupies its own time and space and is a separate thing from that real-time collusion." Most photographers see only one or the other of those aspects of the medium. Documentary, news, and street photographers see mainly the reality, the content or subject. Artistic and academic photographers see mainly the image, its style, technique, and fantasy associations. Great photographs exist not so much where image and reality meet and balance, but in the electric tension between real and unreal. The good photographer skates as close to the brink of total realism while still honoring the otherness of the image, or she skates as close to the otherness, the sheer unique two-dimensional object, while never leaving the direct realism of which the medium is capable. But the great photographer skates close to both brinks simultaneously, and in the process frequently states new ways the problem can be perceived, if not solved. New ways the rules can be broken, if not observed. The result is a two-dimensional image that is a separate experience in itself, while totally authentic to the real continuum which gave it birth. Beyond that, for me, it is a question of how much. Was it worth doing? Was it worth doing? How many photographic balls was the photographer able to juggle at once? How deep a perception of being alive? How rich an emotion? How sensuous an experience? How elegant a line or tone or technique? Or how inelegant? How real? How unreal? How surreal? A camera is a filter through which the reality of an existential moment, the world, plus the camera and plus all of the person, pours onto the film, which preserves the visual aspects of that moment as photographed from where you are, physically as well as in terms of awareness and depth. Writing about a visual medium tends to make the simple complex. If you want to make photographs, all you do is point the camera at whatever you wish, click the shutter whenever you want. If you want to judge a good photograph, ask yourself, is that it bears the unmistakable etching of the aperture of the camera and the shutter speed of the camera. So a camera stops time. The camera is an extension of sight. We don't see these things, you know, or if we do, you know, it goes by so quickly. But the camera stops time, and so, you know, there's something very melancholic or almost nostalgic about any photograph because it stops time, and our time stops as well. So, you know, we don't live forever. So, you know, these pictures live longer than we do. So, you know, there's something I think very inherently melancholic about this form of art. Painting is a different story. You can do that, but you can always change it. You don't have to. My name's .com, richardsandler.com.
Robert? Like I had asked Karen,
Was black and white. Also the expense, you know, Kodachrome or, you know, making pictures from slides or negatives is a lot more expensive. This I can do at home. I develop my own film, obviously, and make prints. So, but as a filmmaker, I'm way into color. Yeah, way. I love, as a filmmaker, I have found my color chops, you know, and I adore it as a filmmaker and a video maker. But in still photography, it wasn't my thing. A wise-ass kid, you know. I was a little bit of an outlaw, and I don't know, you know, I didn't grow up in Manhattan. I grew up in Forest Hills, Queens, which is not exactly, you know, street country, but at a very young age, like 9, 10, I started taking the subway into the city by myself and just wandering around Times Square. So I had a certain, you know, sense of the street and how to come. A little crazy. Well, you know, that was always the rub. That was always the edge of things, you know. And I went over that edge a number of times. You know I did. And so. And I wasn't looking to get into fights. You know, other people that I know get into fights. I never got into fights with anybody, ever. I never fought. got my, juices going, because there's some, I'm putting myself on the line here, I'm like, taking a chance. How do I know this guy's not going to get out of the, train and beat the shit out of me? I don't know that, So, but anyway, like I say, the other thing about me is that I get these like 7-year itches or whatever, I like doing different things. I like having beginners. The whole thing. I want to question the whole process. I want to question. I mean, I become like a documentary filmmaker. I want to ask this question about us, all of us now. Terrible things that were done for us to, be having this privilege right now, of even being here at all. I mean, we tend to bury, the horrendous history that has allowed this, us to have this privilege, and I can't live with that anymore. I have to deal with it. I can't live with it. I can't like willy-nilly go along, making street pictures of New York that are, lyrical and sing